Hello and welcome to another edition of the Osteopathic Lyceum podcast. What I want to try to get through today from what I'll call first principles is a discussion around that's going to move from a byte of information to electronic medical records to the opportunity for online booking and generally practice management. Now, this is something many practitioners probably figure out on their own in their own way, which is essentially what I'm going to advocate for, but maybe provide a framework for the making of choices as to how you do this. There's going to be a lot of people who are convinced very, very highly or in a very strong way about how they run their practice and why it's the best. And that is what it is. But what I want to do is start, as I said, from first principles, a byte of information. So a byte of information could be anything. So we can call it a variable, but that variable is a chunk of something that can be accessed. Okay. That byte of information, if it is only required in one location by one person in a meaningful sense at any given time, then any electronic mediation of that is less than ideal. Now, to say that a different way, the requirement of the internet and electricity for a byte of information, if it's only ever needed by one person in one place at one time, electricity and the internet are less than ideal. The time and possible engineering failures is high for that byte of information. So the amount of time it takes to embed that piece of information is higher than on a piece of paper. So that means that your patient records and your scheduling ability do not in any way need to be mediated by the internet or electricity if you are the only one interacting with your schedule. So if you're trying to run a schedule, a book, a physical book with paper is absolutely fine. With the advent of smartphones, the phone in your pocket does a fantastic job of that. It's almost always on you. It takes a little bit longer than writing it out in pen or pencil in a book, but your phone, again, we talk about electricity and the internet as probably relating to the schedule on your phone is slightly less ideal than a paper book, okay? If you are running a practice, you are the one running the schedule. There are no other practitioners. You are the point of contact, or if you have admin support, you have one person practicing and one administrator. The book on paper is absolutely fine. The patient request for scheduling comes into the administrator or to the practitioner. They write it in the book. That byte of information is encoded appropriately, can be accessed where it's required. Okay. If you have more than one practitioner that does not have immediate access to that book at all times that they would need it, now all of a sudden you see immediately where online booking software, aka electricity and the internet, become valuable. So as somebody is not able to check their schedule by calling into the clinic at a particular time or doesn't want to, because preferences are at play here, then internet-mediated booking software allows each practitioner of however many you have to check their schedule online at any time they need it. That means that byte of information, aka the scheduled appointment, is needed by more than one person at the same time in different locations. That is the strength of electronic booking software or internet-mediated booking software, that the byte of information is accessible at more than one location at the same time. That is your choice, right? So your choice matrix for should I have online booking software or should I not is primarily based on how many locations is this byte of information needed, the byte of information being the scheduled appointment, how many locations is it needed at the exact same time? If it's only one, paper is superior. If it is multiple, then the reality is that an internet-based booking software is preferable. Now, there are many different ways to do that. You can use a shared Google Calendar. You can use other shared free calendars. There's lots of ways to do this. Because what you can start to make the case for is with respect to note taking or record keeping for what occurred or what was reported or what occurred in the visit, in the healthcare interaction, does also not need to be mediated by electricity or the internet. It's not required. The same choice matrix with respect to a patient note or a note about the healthcare interaction with respect to what was reported and what occurred, if it's only required in one location at any given time, then paper is superior. If it's required in multiple locations at the exact same point in time, the internet mediated software becomes superior only at that point. One of the cons of anything that is available at more than one location at the exact same time is that the security requirements become higher. So if you want to talk about privacy for health information, so I think in America it's HIPAA, and I believe in Canada it's properly called PHIPAA, Privacy for Health Information Patient Protection Act. I'm probably messing that acronym up, but it's relatively close. It's PHIPPA in Canada. I believe in America it's HIPAA, so there's just no P. The requirement for securing that information goes up because you're doing it through a third-party provider, and you have to assume that the third-party provider is appropriately protecting patient information through this system, which allows that byte of information to be shared at the exact same time in multiple locations to people who are assumed to have appropriate levels of access. Somebody who is relatively savvy with respect to internet security can often bypass those systems, and there have been large data breaches with companies who are supposed to be protecting private health information. This has occurred, right? So you have evidence that the records of patients are not as secure as one may hope they are through a third-party internet-based provider for scheduling software and for note-keeping software. Realistically, I don't know, or I wouldn't make the prediction that people care about the health status of those who have online medical records. They're probably more concerned about banking information, such as credit cards, because many clinics will keep credit cards on file for if a patient misses, if a patient is being charged, or say they forgot their wallet, you can charge their credit card. If a patient is being charged a no-show fee, you can charge their card. You have them sign all kinds of agreements for that, but you keep the card on file. That's probably what people are going to be interested in with respect to security of online medical records that are going to be associated with payment systems, because that's usually what you're looking at. So your requirement for safety of that information goes way up. Whereas if you have that exact same information physically on hand, on paper, the security requirements have changed, not in reality, but as far as the ease in which you can enforce them. So if somebody wants a paper record that contains credit card information, they physically have to present themselves at the location where that byte of information on paper lives. They have to get by likely multiple locks, and they have to get into and find the exact piece of paper that they want. So it is harder to do based on time and space, or temporal and spatial dimensions, or things that can be measured in time and space. Whereas if it's electronically mediated and online, the time and space requirements for getting to that information have changed. Okay. Why should it matter to anybody who cares about osteopathic manual therapy with respect to electricity, with respect to bytes of information, with respect to the online environment versus paper? Why should this matter? Well, you're in practice, you are scheduling appointments. You may want to maintain private information that is going to include health information that I think less people are going to be interested in, but you're also going to maintain payment information. The payment information is a major, major security concern for many people. You don't want to be the point at which somebody's credit card or debit card or bank account is compromised, right? So we get back to this choice matrix, is where is the byte of information required? If it's required in more than one location at the same time, the internet and electricity are the better choice. If it's required in one location at the same time, paper is superior. people have to cross more time and more space to get to that information. However, the people that need that information in a legitimate or a valid way have it on hand. Now, they do have to cross some time and space. Let's just say you're trying to process a payment. The patient calls in and says, hey, I can't make it. Please charge my credit card. I'm happy for you to do so. You just have to go to that piece of paper. You have to make sure that your filing system is appropriate. Your filing system does take physical space. Some people like the online booking softwares and the online practice management softwares because there's less space taken up. Fully understood, completely makes sense. And then say the storage time and the requirements to keep something for 7 years subsequent to last visit, it's easier to do online. Now, don't for a moment think that the physical space is not being taken. It's just not being taken in front of you, because you have to recognize that anything that is stored in an online environment is stored in a physical space that has very, very high electricity requirements, because you have to have universal power or uninterrupted power supplies. You have to have very cold rooms, so you have to pay for HVAC. You have to pay to keep the room cold. You have to pay for high-tech fire suppression, because if the fire goes off, it has to go out immediately, so it's chemically mediated. You have to pay for maintenance. So server farms are real. They take up a lot of space. They take up gigantic amounts of electricity. So you are not doing anything that isn't taking up a large amount of space when you transition to an online storage environment or practice management software. You are offloading that somewhere to someone else. Your electricity requirements for a paper-based system, say for patient information, let's just say you have a shared calendar and online booking to some degree, but you don't have anything where you're storing patient information aside from name online. Then your paper, because what you can do is you can have a shared online calendar, because let's just say you have multiple practitioners, okay? That choice matrix means that you would consider online as the option. But you keep all of their treatment notes and you keep all of their personal information, including payment options, on paper. Well, your electricity requirements go way down, right? Or the electricity requirements of that information goes way down, right? So you've got these trade-offs to consider. Your requirement to maintain space and maintain files goes up, because that's a physical requirement in front of you, because you're required to keep that safe. If you're relying on an online practice management to keep it safe, you're relying and assuming that they're going to do a good job. You're relying and assuming that their fire protection for the server is appropriate. You're relying and assuming that their ability to maintain the environmental controls is appropriate. There's a lot of assumptions that go into it, whereas paper, electricity goes way down, it's in your physical space, and you are now responsible for it. So you're looking at trade-offs here. With respect to what you record within a visit, this is highly dependent on your jurisdiction and your governing bodies. At least in Canada, the governing bodies are your professional associations with respect to osteopathic manual therapy. So you have to pay attention to what they require of you, what they ask of you. The actual things that are exceptionally important for osteopathic manual practice in recording what occurred in a visit is, what did the patient say? So you're subjective. What did you find and what did you do about it, right? So your objective, and you could say your plan, right? Your objective findings. The assessment is always kind of funny in your standard SOAP note approach, but you could basically have, if you note appropriately, you could have what's called a travel card. You could have a piece of cardstock with lines on it, the patient's name. You could have the date of the visit. You can record other information. Some professional associations require you also note the price that you charged, right? That's completely up to that professional association. It's valid if they say it's valid. So you would have the patient's name on the top of the card. That's their card. You have the date of the visit, the price of the visit. Then you can say subjective, whatever they reported. Then you can say what you found and what you did about it, right? So you can use the standard notation with respect to osteopathic manual practice. You can say MFR for myofascial release. You can say PIR for post-isometric relaxation. So your standard abbreviations are completely appropriate there, but you can have it. So you can have multiple visits, each of which might take 2 lines on a piece of cardstock. You've got back and front. You've got a lot of visits on one piece of paper. That doesn't take up a lot of space. You put it in a file, right? You appropriately organize your filing cabinet. There you go. It doesn't take up a lot of physical space. It doesn't take up a lot of information space. right? It's not hard to do, but you do have to be sensitive to what your governing body and your jurisdiction require you to record. But the absolute required information is simply, what did the patient report? What did you find? And what did you do? That is absolutely essential with respect to your ability to recall what you did and what the patient said, and then monitor progress to some degree over time. There's different things that you can place in there with respect to how you report it, right? Or how you report graded change. There's lots of options there that can be discussed and worked through and refined. But that paper record doesn't take much time at all. It's really quick to write. It doesn't take up an entire sheet of paper for a visit. You can really condense a visit into probably 2 lines in most circumstances. Now, if you compare that to a patient record that is stored with practice management software online, it takes a certain amount of time to type it. If you're using graphic representations, it takes a certain amount of time to note on that. So your time for note taking goes up. Your security challenges and the assumptions contained within goes up, because that piece of information now, that byte of information about the patient visit, is available in multiple locations if multiple people will need to examine it at the same time. So that is a benefit, but the con is that the security concern is tougher, and the other con is it takes more time. So really what I'm hoping that I'm presenting from a very, very basic choice matrix, where it's, does this byte of information need to be accessed in more than one place at the exact same time? If yes, internet better. If no, paper is better. The con of paper is it takes up space. The con of, well, the pro of paper is that it's faster and it's less expensive. The pro of the internet-based practice management softwares is that they integrate a lot of things together, right? They allow for a byte of information to be found at more than one location at the exact same time. But the assumptions on security are very, very challenging, right? So your security requirements can get funky. So you can make choices as to what you want online, what you want on paper. You can make a lot of choices there. One of the other things with respect to scheduling, right, is the concept that many people have a preference for the opportunity to book the patient, from the patient perspective, to book on their schedule at their time, at their convenience. As a practitioner, this is a major trade-off. If you leave yourself entirely up to the whim of the patient, you can easily have a very, very spread out and gap schedule, because different people have different preferences. Different people have different schedules. Whereas if you are admin support or the entire mediator of the booking, you can control the flow of your day much better. If you let people book online, right, they will choose what is convenient for them, which may be very inconvenient for you psychologically, emotionally, or with respect to other responsibilities that you may have in a day, such as common banking, such as responsibility for family members, things of that nature. So online booking is a trade-off. It gives the sense of lowered friction to the patient and convenience to the patient, but it takes that away from the practitioner's ability to control their schedule. So what I would say is, if you prefer as an individual to control your schedule, keep it tighter, and offer certain times, and if somebody is really adamant that they can't make it, then you can make the choice to offer them a time that's slightly outside of that within your comfort. Whereas if the patient is completely free to choose, with respect to whatever boundaries you set with respect to your online booking software, they choose. So the convenience is now for the patient, which some people may prefer as practitioners, and it is no longer for the practitioner to control their schedule. So your trade-off is, how much control do you want over your schedule versus how much convenience do you want some patients to experience? What I would say for myself personally, I would much rather have the control over my schedule. I would rather all bookings go through me saying yes or no, whether there is the presence of an admin staff or not. The admin, my preference would be that this doesn't always work, and this doesn't happen in my practice life entirely, but my general preference, if I had a hierarchy, would be that the admin would ask me, can I book this person at this time, right? Or we would have had a predetermined conversation as, this is what I'm okay with booking. If somebody wants to book over here, ask me, right? You can set those parameters with the person who's taking most of the booking. There will be some patients who want to book online, and that may be a triage mechanism. If you don't want them booking online and they want to book online, that may be a triage mechanism to keep them out of your practice and go into a practice where there is a higher degree of acceptance for online booking, right? So remember, you're making trade-offs with respect to the first consideration being the requirement of a byte of information to be in one location or in multiple locations at any given point of time, as well as your preference from how you manage data and how you manage that data and how you also manage the interface between yourself and the general public with respect to how you run your practice schedule. If you are okay with the convenience of the patient being at the top of the hierarchy, online booking is fantastic. If you want to control your schedule so that you can make it psychologically, emotionally, and with respect to responsibility to others, such as family members, through your own day, then having all bookings go through yourself or through an admin staff that properly understands your preferences and your requirements on a given day is probably the superior way. So many people have already figured this out. They have their system. I would simply like to add a choice matrix based on first principles, preferences, and the requirements of a particular byte of data being required in one location or multiple locations. So hopefully all of that makes some sense and you take some benefit from that over time. And as maybe an experienced practitioner, you have a choice matrix now to reconceptualize your practice. And as a new practitioner or an upcoming practitioner who's still in school, you also have the opportunity to use this as a framework to make the choices for how you schedule your practice.